have a practice or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast, brought to you by Trulytics by Envestnet. This week on the show, Laura Gregg is back. Laura is the Senior Vice President and Director of Practice Management and Advisor Research at FlexShares ETFs. And she is making her return to the MFA podcast to talk about her team's latest study titled The Race to Scalability 2022, Current Insights from 12 Years of Advisor Research on Investment Management Trends. The concept of scalability is right in our wheelhouse on this show. If you're a frequent listener or watcher, you know the common theme lately has been looking for opportunities for advisors to scale their businesses and their abilities. The timing is perfect for this episode as well, because as we inch toward the end of the year, you and your team are likely thinking about your goals for 2023, and this episode of the show is absolutely going to help. Okay, before we get to the conversation with Laura, please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a guest or a topic for the show, hit us up. Simply go to trulytics.com and use the little contact form there, or shoot us an email, podcast@trulytics.com, and we'll get back to you right away. All right? Okay, let's get to the conversation with Laura Gregg. Well, Laura Gregg, welcome back to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's so wonderful to see you.
Mike, this has been the highlight of my week. I am so excited to catch up with you again and really to talk about this topic. So,
me too.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. You're always welcome back. I've told people this, and I'm not just saying this because you're here. Like, you are literally one of my favorite guests. Not only are you a joy to chat with, but you always bring the thunder when it comes to some amazing information and some ideas, right, for those of us in the industry to think about, like, where the world is headed and the kind of the ground we're playing on now, right, the playing field, if you will. We were just talking about sports.
All right. Well, you're putting a lot of pressure on me early on, Mike. So I hope I can deliver the thunder.
Well, you got this awesome study behind you to back you up, right? You guys are like, hey, check this out. All right, so well, let's dive into it. Your FlexShares ETFs team at Northern Trust recently released a new study titled The Race to Scalability 2022, Current Insights from 12 Years of Advisor Research on Investment Management Trends. And I'm bouncing off the walls with excitement. By the way, I'm always like this because I'm hyper caffeinated usually. But I want to dive into some of your findings. The concept of scale, particularly, is of interest to me, and it's one that we've been talking about a lot over the last several years. So it's kind of been a thing, right?
Yeah.
But we're seeing, and I think it's revolves around the concept of firms are getting bigger and bigger in most of the contexts you see. But scalability is a different concept than just making a bigger firm, right? If you're adding new advisors, great, you got bigger, but you're not necessarily a scalable business. So let's start by setting the stage. How are you defining scalability for the purposes of this study? And that'll kind of like lead us into the rest of the chat.
Yeah. So, you mentioned this, our new survey. We've done this 7 times. We do it every other year.
Yeah.
And how we think of scalability is really shedding those tasks that will enable you to have more time. And sometimes that's more time to dive into client relationships and retention. In other cases, it's more time to dive into business development, prospecting, or whatever it is, whatever your goal or your business model is that you want to achieve, you generally need more time to get there. So it's figuring out what you can shed, what you should keep, and going from there.
I love it. I spend a lot of time in the startup ecosystem, right? Particularly here in the fintech space. And scalability, right, is always an important thing. When you think about it from a software perspective, it's like, okay, can this architecture of the software, what we've built, handle more users, if you will, right? So you think about, servers you have there, the database, right? Your pipe, like how many, what's your throughput model in terms of like how many people can be on the system at once and all that type of stuff. And so that's, always on my mind when I think about any business, right? But when you think about a financial advisory business, I don't think many advisors are thinking this way. And I recently had a conversation with Aaron Klein, who's the CEO of Riskalyze at
Mhm.
RIA Summit in Boston. This was actually last week, the week before we're recording this. And he made this point that, at the end of the day, advisors are selling their time, right? His point was that in order for an advisor to scale a business, he or she is going to need to find efficiencies, as you were just describing, through technology and leveraging the services of others. And one of the big ideas for the study and the survey results that you're putting out there is that outsourcing of investment management for advisory firms is something that can help them with their scalability. And I think that's a pretty great place to start with when we start talking about the scalability. So first, what activities are you including in investment management for the purposes of your survey so that advisors can wrap their heads around it? Because I think we all have a pretty broad understanding of what investment management activities are, but what are you including in the survey from that perspective?
Yeah. So the list of what we've included has grown over
Mm,
time as the ability to outsource these functions has become way more flexible over
yeah.
the 12 years of the study. But we include things like portfolio management,
Hmm.
security research, asset allocation, back office, due diligence, ongoing monitoring of the money managers, which is really important. And, or we have the on the pick list, all investment functions. And,
Hmm.
what we found when we first fielded this in 2009 is that those advisors who were outsourcing everything. It was in
Mm,
the wake of the financial crisis.
okay.
A lot of advisors were having super difficult conversations with their clients about how their portfolios were doing, and all of a sudden, they realized that maybe they didn't want to be the money manager any longer. Maybe they
Yeah.
would be better being the client relationship manager. And so they began to outsource or embrace
Yeah.
this, and they sent it all off. But as time went on and the markets went up and stayed
Yeah.
up for more than a decade, we saw advisors starting to take bits and pieces
Yeah.
of the investment functions back in house. Now,
Hmm.
some of that was that they've grown organically and they could afford to build out a CIO team. In other cases, they were just bringing back in strategies that they love to manage,
Hmm.
that brought them joy. But, through this time, the outsourcing solution providers have really extended their reach, have extended their flexibility, the technology capabilities. And so it's not all or nothing proposition anymore, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah. I agree. What's interesting to me, this just popped in my head as you were describing this. For most financial advisors, they're not trained asset management folks, right? They didn't go to school. Actually, I think many clients would be shocked at how many advisors did not go to school to study finance, right?
Yeah,
Right? and
a
and
lot.
so they were trained in it. They applied for a job at some point in time. If they're have a couple of decades into the business, they were a stockbroker job, right? Or
Mhm.
and more recently, they would have been hired as a financial advisor and trained. Past the Series 7, right? Maybe get a Series 65 if you're coming into an RIA relationship, but they're trained, but they're not necessarily trained to be money managers, if you will, investment
Mhm.
managers. They are trained to understand stocks, bonds, mutual funds, right? To
Mhm.
understand some complexities of a person's financial life, and then to render that advice and guidance through relationship building, right?
Mhm.
That's where most financial advisors' sweet spot from a strength perspective is. So it does make sense that they would lean on someone else to do some of the actual heavy lifting of investment management, right?
So, the interesting thing about the survey is that it's since its inception, about 60% of those we survey are keeping the investment functions in the house and
Mhm.
40% are outsourcing. Now, there's a lot of nuances underlying
Sure.
that over time. But, there are those people that they wake up every morning and they are so excited to get in the office, see what the market did, start looking at different securities, and they are true investment managers.
Sure.
And some of them do that very, very well, and they don't really like the relationship side. That's,
Yeah.
not in their sweet spot. But like you said, a lot of advisors, that is what their sweet spot is. And so, as people talk about outsourcing, my comment to them is really take some time and take stock of where you're truly adding value, not where
Yeah.
you think you're adding value. The advisors that tend not to outsource say, I'll never outsource because investment research is my value proposition. However, over time, and especially during the pandemic, that shifted a bit.
Yeah.
Again, so when we started this, we were in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, and
Yeah.
everybody was sending stuff out. Then they brought it in because it was really easy to deliver absolute returns, right?
Yeah.
And you were a genius.
That's right.
And
Everybody's a
now,
genius when the market goes up every single year. Like, oh, look at how good I am as an investment manager. I picked all this stuff. Yeah, everything went up.
exactly. And so, over that time, as I would be
Yeah.
talking about this, I would always say, I'm not looking forward to it, but in a way, I guess I was. What will happen when the market retracts again? And so we got a vision of that. And we saw that advisors increase their use of investment outsourcing. Some of those advisors who had taken stuff back in were sending it back out. And that's really the beauty of outsourcing. If you do it right and you do the proper due diligence and monitoring, you never have to fire yourself,
Yeah.
but you can make changes with the providers you're using and bring it in, bring it out. Also, during the pandemic and even now, the great resignation, we're
Yeah.
seeing advisors lean into outsourcing simply because they can't maintain the staff that they need to do it well. So there's a lot of different reasons around why people do or don't.
I love it. I love it. I want to dig into one don't category, if you will. I was surprised in looking at the survey that only 32% of RIAs are outsourcing investment management. That really kind of maybe sit back a little bit because I'm like, well, wait a minute. Most of these RIAs are, break away at some point in time. They broke away from a wirehouse or an independent broker dealer, and they decide we're gonna form an RIA. Most of them are relatively small shops too, right? Now, some of them are getting large, but I would think as a small business owner, you would be embracing more strongly outsourcing of services so that you can scale your own ability, right? You can free up your time. To your point, why do you think it's so low? Why do you think only 32% of RIAs? I would have thought that would have been better than 50% for some reason.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on under that number. So,
Mhm.
like you said, a lot of the RIAs are real small. Some of them are so small that they can still keep all the balls in the air. They
Sure.
don't have the resources or the assets to make that shift and start outsourcing. Like we were talking about before, a lot of the RIAs are investment managers. That's how they view
Mm.
themselves. That's what they love. So they're keeping it inside. And also, there are a lot of mega RIAs,
Yeah.
the billion plus RIAs. Now they've got the scale and the assets to be able to afford to build out that CIO team. And so they're not outsourcing. However, many of those mega RIAs do outsource their lower value accounts just to
Mm.
make sure things are, in place. They focus their efforts, not surprisingly, on the 20% of their highest revenue clients,
Yeah.
outsource the management of the rest. So there's a lot going on. There's not a one reason that the
Yeah.
RIA number is low, but I will say during the pandemic, RIAs increased their usage of outsourcing more than other advisors.
That makes sense. It really does make sense. You start to think about, can you do this as efficiently and as not only from an effort perspective, but also from a cost perspective,
Mhm.
than another provider can do it, right? Who that's all they do, right? And
Right.
they've got more staff than you do. They have more technological firepower than you do to put to bear on this thing that needs doing. And at a certain point in time, you look at well, here's how time consuming and costly it is for me to do it. And then you're willing to do it for, I don't know, pick a number, X amount of basis points or a flat fee. I'm sure the
Mhm.
models vary on some of these outsourcing firms. Oh, I might have to lean into you doing it, right? Because if you take that, like you said, time off my plate, I've just freed up the ability to go get more clients, right? I
Mhm.
can go or serve my existing clients better.
Yeah, so there's an advisor that I interviewed early on in the survey. And I thought how he said this was great. He said, Laura, I view myself, not as the world's best investment manager, but a smart business owner. And so
Mm,
I'll often, if I'm worried that my client is concerned that I'm not managing the money, I'll say, I'll look at my computer and I'll spin around real quick and say, hey, do you know what the market just did?
yeah.
And they'll say, no, what? And he said, I don't either, because my focus is here today with you. And I can have this much time, this much focus with you and figuring out your plan,
Yeah.
because I'm not managing the day-to-day investments. I've got people that are focused on that 24/7. And I always liked how he said that, because we all can't be masters of everything.
That's right.
And we want to deliver competitive returns and a great client experience.
Well, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what obviously clients want if we're talking about just the investments that they're managing, they want the number to keep going up, right? Nobody likes a down quarter or whatever. Like, everybody wants everything to go up, but people do understand that markets go up, markets go down. So long as you're not dramatically underperforming and we're getting our clock cleaned here when we should be making money, most clients can be pretty chill with that. What they really want to know is, am I on track to achieve my goals, right? Like, here's what I'm trying to achieve in life, right?
And, the plan is so important. And there are, we see what clients expect from their advisors change dramatically. It's not just brokerage anymore. And,
Right.
Unfortunately, there still are a lot of advisors who view that as what their clients want or need. I'm just here to manage the money, and that's it. But things are changing rapidly, and in a down market, especially, if you've spent the time, you've built the plan with your clients, it's a great opportunity to call them and say, hey, I just wanted to check in. The market's been really crazy, but I just wanted to let you know we planned for this, and your plan is in place. So you're not going to have to give up anything we talked about. We figured this in. There's always up and down markets. And just the power of that, to be able to go and reaffirm that everything's still in place, even though it feels, if you turn on CNBC or whatever, that the sky is falling and we're all going under.
That, by the way, that's their business model, by the way, is you need to be terrified every time after you watch that. You're either terrified that the world is ending and you got to pull all your money to cash or whatever, or you're terrified that you're missing out. You got the FOMO big time going and you got to get in. It's like, that's their whole business model. So stay off CNBC and those types of shows. Come on, do something. Well, you talked about the plan, and that actually is a fantastic segue to something I wanted to dive into a little more, which is the expansion of services. Because over the past 2 years, I have heard this drumbeat countless times on this show and others that advisors should be looking to add extra services beyond investment management, like you said, particularly financial planning and tax planning, tax strategy stuff to their offerings for their clients. And it makes sense, right, that you're going to offer more comprehensive financial advisory solutions. One hiccup there, though, is most financial advisors are not CFPs, and they're even fewer are CPAs, right? So they're not trained in financial planning, really, and they're definitely not trained in accounting, right? Tax accounting and tax law and so forth. They know enough to say, hey, tax loss harvesting, right? That's about it. So let's talk about the value of these services as a means to scale a traditional investment management business, right? Offered by financial advisors. And how do advisors add these services without blowing up their headcount?
Yeah. So, I may be preaching to the choir, but you absolutely have to deliver a holistic experience to your clients. They, again, what they expect from you is changing dramatically. And if all you're delivering is a competitive portfolio, that is not going to help you monetize your business and to be able to sell it when you want to do that.
Right.
We did, separate from this research study, we've done some work recently on how advisors can grow wallet share with their existing clients. And it really ended up being a behavioral study, and we identified 5 client personas that are probably in everybody's book, but 3 of the 5 personas, or 83% of our universe, were people who expected and desired a holistic experience in working with their advisor. Now, there are a lot of other things going on, but 83% of the market in our study wants that. So,
Yeah.
I get it's expensive to add FTEs, but really, if you think about planning, there's such great planning programs out there that are really automated. You just
Yeah.
have to get the right input. So it's not like you've got to hire an army of planners.
Right.
If you're a firm that's serving 80, 100, 125 folks, you might just need one planner. And I would
Yeah.
also advise, push your FAs to get their CFP, and especially as you're hiring younger advisors, make sure they have it. There's just such a tremendous crop of young advisors coming out of these schools. Texas Tech, I'll call out, since we're talking to you in Austin. I know that's not in Austin, but
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming out so well trained. I mean, they're sitting for their CFPs. These are great people to bring into your practice, because you do need that planning, because that's where the sticky assets are, right?
Yeah.
Everybody can move, if you have a bump in performance. We saw that
Yeah.
in another research study we did. And as it relates to CPAs, I think that's a really nice to have,
Yeah.
but I don't think that that's a must have.
Sure.
However, a couple things with that, if you can afford, and if you want to go that direction and have a CPA on your staff, that's incredible, because you'll know where all of your clients' assets are, because you'll be seeing their tax returns.
Yeah.
If you want to figure out how to get those assets that aren't with you currently, that's great if you can see their tax return. But that's not feasible for most firms.
Yeah.
So I would say just continue to build your center of influence network.
Yeah.
Make sure there's 2 or 3 really reputable CPAs in your network that you can rely upon. Also, trust and estate attorneys.
Yeah.
Those are very important as well. But make sure, that they understand that it's a two-way street. I often hear people say, well, I refer a lot of business to them and I never get anything in return. So in that vein, I would say, make sure you're transparent.
Sure.
We're all in sales, right? So tell them,
Yeah.
I'm going to be pushing these high net worth clients to you, and I really expect a little bit coming back to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a, by the way, I love that. Like, hey, by the way, here's the relationship we have here. It was funny. We were just joking about this, and I don't have to worry about you because you're a great promoter when it comes to any podcast that you're on and so forth. But we were actually just talking about this in a production meeting last week. Like, hey, you come on a podcast. You know what? As a guest, you also have a role. You need to promote the podcast. Like, you need to share it on your feed, all this type of stuff. So it's the same goes for if you're an advisor and you're working with, kind of call it a partner, an outsourced partner, whether it's a CPA or so forth. Hey, guess what? Estate attorney, I'm going to expect some referrals back my way as well. But there are some services, and we've talked to a couple of them on this show. Retirement tax services. There's one called Client First, which is not a tax, but they're actually kind of like a matchmaking solution for people to go in and find those estate attorneys and so forth. And we're having another one coming on, Elevate CPA Group. And they're starting to offer these services where, like, hey, this is what we do, kind of white label for you, financial advisor. Like, so you will be the one point of contact with your client, talking tax strategy. We're behind you, offering all the analysis and insights. You get to present it as, hey, this is what we think you should do. And if you have questions, you go, okay, let me take those questions, go back to the tax team, right? And get those answered. It really opens up your ability. To your point, the tax stuff is really gold, right? Let's go find out more opportunities for your clients.
And I think we have a common friend, Lacey Garcia,
yes,
who is building Willow.
Yes.
And that's a service where, you can tap into financial planning coaches and work side by side. They can interact with your clients, with you. And again, that also gives you the opportunity. I think in one of our last podcasts, we talked about the importance of diversity.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, you can bring in a diverse person, whether that's diverse by gender or race or LGBTQ or whatever, and add to your team without that full-time employee expense. And there's other services as well, but I was just recently talking with Lacey, so she was top of mind.
I'm so glad you brought Lacey up. I love Lacey. I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan. Wonderful. I've had her on a couple of shows, and she's magnificent. And I agree with that, it was an unexpected angle on outsourcing of the value of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you should be looking to expand the types of clients you service actively, but sometimes you're not even actively looking to do that. So you've been servicing, a family, husband and wife for a while, and suddenly like, oh, you know what? They have a couple of adult daughters. Oh my gosh. Like, we may need to bring some female firepower on the staff. Well, I don't have the FTE budget just yet. Well, great. There are services like Willow that can help you there, right? There are other services. You might have clients who are starting to get more complex financial lives that you don't feel you have the skills to handle. Well, great. There are firms out there that can help you with more complex financial planning, more complex tax strategy stuff that can elevate your business, again, without you having to go, great, I've got to find an extra 150 grand, salary for this person to get this off the ground. And they're not going to be doing a ton of work at the beginning. Yeah. You can kind of use what you need. Right?
Yeah. And in addition to that, it's just talking to somebody yesterday who's, the business isn't launched yet, but the idea, he's a financial therapist. And they're bringing it together, financial planning, financial therapy, and working in conjunction with the advisor. So, how people interact with their money, you can often get a sense of whether they're struggling. Mental health has been such a big issue, especially since the pandemic. But there are just so many different ways to tap in to expertise to help you further show your clients that you care about them. Because at the end of the day, they want to feel heard and they want to feel cared about. And by bringing this all together for them, being the quarterback, if you will, why do they need to go anywhere else? You're simplifying their life.
Yeah, I love that. I've said this a bunch of times that, look, your clients can get the products and the services basically that you offer pretty much anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's somewhat of a commoditized business, and they can pay about the same price
and go
everywhere
online
else.
And get it. And
they might be able to get it cheaper. Why did they choose you? They chose you because of you. They like you, that you made them feel comfortable and confident in putting their assets with you, that you could help them chart a course for their financial future. That's why they're with you, right? It wasn't because you were some sort of slick sales guy or sales gal, right? And you just tricked them into signing the contract. No, they like you for some reason. Okay, that's awesome. Well, keep managing that relationship, but you do need to continue to bring value to them and help make sure they're doing it. And if you feel like you can't bring your best, great, bring in extra services. Or if you're hitting against the ceiling of your capacity because, hey, I've got 100 clients, this is it, I can't do anymore. Well, you don't have to go out and hire an army of other advisors to do it. There's other ways to do this.
So Mike, you touched on something that I know I'm going off the topic of scalability and the wallet share, but it resonated with me. One of our personas is the simplifier. Everybody's got these in their practice.
Yeah.
They don't have any investment expertise. They just want somebody to come in, take care of things for them. Just push the easy button. And generally you get all their assets in a very short amount of time. And then advisors get comfortable. Like, oh, well, I got that. But what they don't realize is these folks need to know that they're top of mind for you.
Yeah.
And so they need those check-ins. They probably need them more than your other clients. And all it is, I heard you had a new grandbaby. How's she doing? I heard Junior's going off to UT Austin. How's he doing? Those little tiny things are so powerful in retention of those assets.
Yeah.
But you need the time to do that. And if you're managing all the plans, all of the investments, everything else, you're likely not going to have the time for that 15, 20-minute call every quarter.
100%. I am so glad you brought that up because, what you basically just covered in a great story there is there's a lot that goes into being a financial advisor, right? It's a full-time job managing relationships. It just is, right? Especially if you have 100 relationships to manage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, by the way, it's not just one relationship. If we're managing a husband and wife team, well, guess what? Both of those people need your attention and they need it differently, right?
Absolutely.
They're unique human beings, even though they're a partnership as it relates to the
Mm-hmm.
the client relationship. They are unique humans, right? One of them might be more risk tolerant, and one of them is more conservative. Like, well, you've got to find the balance.
Mm-hmm.
I once had early in my career when I was active as a financial advisor, I had a husband look me in the eye and go, "You are a marital compromise." And I just loved it. They
And
were
yeah,
just,
that was good.
I thought it was so wonderful. Like, that's like, I think that's flattering, you know what I mean? Like, but I get it. Like, it's 100%. Like, you are
Yeah.
different people. You have the same general goal, but one of them was like, "Hey, totally cool with the kids going to state school. There's no reason why they need to go to an expensive private school when it comes to education goals." And the other one's like, "No, look, if these kids are smart enough to get into Harvard or whatever, like, I want to go, and I don't think they should have to worry about how it gets paid for." It's like, well, those are two very big, different,
Right.
pills to swallow from a financial goal perspective. So, it is a compromise. Like, well, how much are you going to pay for, mom and dad? And then how
Mm-hmm.
are you going to pay for it? So having those conversations can be a full-time job. And some of that, believe it or not, can be outsourced, right? So I can imagine the advisor who's like, "Laura, are you kidding me? I've got to pay attention and reach out to people every time there's a little micro event in their life and stuff like that." It's like, there are social media services and outsourced people who will gladly monitor a social media feed
Oh,
for you
yeah.
and
Yeah.
let you know that, hey, guess what? It's Laura's birthday coming up. So don't forget, let's put a card in the mail. There's actually services that do that type of stuff for you.
Right. And your
So,
CRM system is a
right.
great
And
way to
just,
do it. In your planning meeting, you hear, they just bought their first home.
yeah,
You just put in the calendar event a year from that day, send out a card that says, "Hey, hope you enjoyed your first year in your new home." It's
perfect.
those things, the birthday, the holiday, awesome. It's those really unexpected things that catch somebody's attention.
That's right.
Like, wow, you remembered that? Oh, no,
Yep.
you just had it in your system and it shot it out. But like you say, there are outsourced solutions where you can spit those
Yeah.
things out to them, and they'll get the gift or card out, and you look
It's
like a
leveraging.
hero.
It was funny. This is going to be a parallel, a little analogy here. But so I tell my kids that you'll be surprised that you can get an extra 5 points from a class, from a teacher, professor, just by being like the kid who raises the hand in the class. I know this sounds silly, but like, look, teachers are human. And yes, the grades are supposed to be objective, right? And all, merit based. There is a reality of like when they're doing grades and some of the grade is subjective, they go, "You know what? I see where Jackson was going on this. Yeah, okay, fine, right? Like whatever." I think it gives you 5 points. I'm convinced of it because I know in my life, I guarantee you that there were classes where I'm like, I probably shouldn't have got an A in that class, but I think the guy liked me or the lady liked me, the
Mike,
professor
you're
liked me.
listening into our conversations around the kitchen table. We were talking before we came on about, I've got a freshman in
Yeah,
college, and, we're beating the drum before we left. Go to office hours, sit in the
yeah.
front row, raise your hand, go to office hours, make sure they know who you are. You're at a great big school. They need to know
Mhm.
you, because when it, like you say, when it falls on the, 89, 90, are you going to get the 90 or are you going to get the 89?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all natural. And so, you see it in academics, but it happens in real business too. So what you were just describing there
Mhm.
with sending a tiny little card, heck, nowadays it could be a text because most
Yeah.
people live on their phones, right? "Hey, how's the first year of the house? It's got a little thing here. You bought a house a year ago. How's that going?" You know how easy that is to do
Yeah.
and unexpected, and the delight that
Mhm.
you will hit with your client. They'll be like, "Oh my gosh, that was really nice." Right? You just made yourself bulletproof. Unless you
Yeah.
are terrible at investment management and losing them tons of money, you're probably not going to lose that client ever. Why? Because they feel it's not just like I'm getting regular communication, the traditional newsletter. No, I'm getting like personalized little updates about me. That's
And
wonderful.
that those are referrals too,
Yeah,
because everybody wants to share when they have a great experience. Like, do you my gal just texted me. They
yeah,
remembered we bought a house a year ago. She's awesome. He's awesome. We go to a little Italian restaurant by our home, and the owner knows that our daughter happened to be home. He's like, "Oh, she loves the vodka rigatoni. Give her the.
Yeah,
I made a little
that's
box for her.
awesome.
Take it home." So my husband's on Facebook, and Frankie's the best, and I just
It's true.
you want to reward when people give you exceptional client experience.
100%. And it makes all the difference in the world. And kind of continuing down our trend of like, why do we want to use outsourcing from using an outsourced service or leveraging technology? It frees you up to do those types of things, right? It's really hard to do that if you're working like 70 hours a week and you're like banging your head against the wall and you can't lift up enough to go, oh, these are humans, right? I need to interact with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some common misconceptions about outsourcing investment management and other services like financial planning and tax planning?
Yeah.
Because we talked about it earlier on. Only 32% of RIAs are outsourcing
Mm-hmm.
investment management. They might be outsourcing other things, but I suspect many are beginning to look at this type of stuff now, right? That it's starting to hit home because they go to the FPA meetings and other. I was just, like I said, at RIA Summit. They go there and they start looking around like, what? You're outsourcing stuff? Like, should I be doing that? So
Yeah.
what are some misconceptions for it, and what might be holding them back, do you think?
Yeah. So in our survey, cost has always been a factor, but
Mm,
it's less so now. The cost has certainly come down over the 12 years we've conducted the survey, but also the feeling of giving up ownership or control, and that there's a perceived lack of flexibility. And I would say now there's way more flexibility than there ever was.
mm.
But I think I'm putting on my compliance hat right now, Mike. Um, so the SEC is really kind of digging into these outsourced relationships recently.
Yeah.
And I think it's much ado about nothing
Yeah.
if you're managing it right. So for advisors, if you choose to outsource the investment management, just make sure you do your fiduciary work. Make sure you do the
Yeah.
due diligence. Make sure you send the money to a reputable firm, of which there are many. And
Yeah.
many of these large firms are there to help the due diligence process move efficiently. But, at the end of the day, they're still your clients. And as much as you'd like to get more time back and have more efficiencies, which is important, you just got to make sure you're doing the work, that how the money's being managed, that you can check in and get any details that you might need if perhaps you do have a SEC rep visit your office. But that's what good advisors do. So I don't think there's anything alarming about it, but just make sure
That's a
you're checking
really
it all
good
out.
That's an incredibly good point that hadn't risen to the top of my mind. It's kind of like, listen, even if you had a CPA prepare your taxes, you're still on the hook to make sure everything was
Mhm.
accurate when you file.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when it comes to your clients, right? You have a fiduciary duty. They're expecting you to do your best. They're expecting you to not be negligent and be on the lookout for errors, right? And mistakes and by the way, mistakes do happen, right? You're in this industry. Occasionally somebody fat fingers something and a trade is wrong or something like
Yeah.
that. So you're still, it's important for you to observe and make sure that everything's on the right track. So I love that suggestion. Let's shift gears into the technology nerdy stuff because I love that. So you looked at wealth tech adoption
Yeah.
in the survey, and wealth tech is kind of a broad category. So some people think of it as, hey, it's a technology solution that automates investment management, but there's like a robo advisory solution, right? And some of those are just doing what advisors have been doing with their model portfolios for a while, right? Like, hey, if you already have like 5 different flavors of asset allocation, there's a robo advisory solution that'll do that for you, so you don't have to do it manually. But there's a whole bunch of other wealth tech components out there. But some advisors tend to get some strong reactions, especially if the robo conversation comes up. They get a little, that's a threat to my business and whatever.
Yeah.
So I get it. It's a relationship-based business, but what are some of the big areas of I guess concern, but also interest and enthusiasm that you're seeing when it relates to wealth tech?
Right. So we've been asking about this. Initially, we started, I think, in 2016. We called it Robo then. We've evolved to
Yeah.
Wealth Tech at this point. But the adoption is still low, but
Mhm.
it's grown. In 2016, 2018, I'd say it was about 6% of our respondents were using some kind of wealth technology
Sure.
platform. It's now up to 16%. So not huge growth, but growth over
Hmm.
6 years. But we also found that 20, I think it was 22, 23% said that they plan to bring in a solution into
Mm.
their practice within the next 2 years. So there's definitely a desire, and I think with advisors, they understand the importance of having a digital practice,
Sure.
and some of these solutions can enable that, make it a little bit simpler.
Yeah.
And you can take it, just like working with a turnkey asset manager, you can take all of it or you can take
Yeah.
bits and pieces of it. So it'll be interesting to see where that comes. But the folks that have adopted it have a really high satisfaction level with, they're satisfied, they're glad that they did it. They've done it in order to find new types of clients,
Yeah.
usually younger,
Yeah.
to be able to service the lower asset accounts more consistently and more efficiently. And, for those that haven't, they're just reticent about the technology and what that means. And will I be able to, if I'm not in here every day for 8 hours,
Yeah.
will I forget how to use it and all of that stuff? So it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah.
But
I'm
I think
fascinated by
there's
it.
value. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really, for exactly the point you made is one strong vote of why you should consider or
Mhm.
offering some sort of wealth tech solution is like, look, well, most wealth managers are looking for wealthy clients, right? It's
Mhm.
way more efficient to manage a client who has several $1,000,000 than somebody who has $50,000 who's just
Mhm.
starting out. But the reality is, it doesn't matter how big your clients are. Chances are you have small clients. Why? Because the children or grandchildren of your core
Mhm.
client, you know, go to mom, dad, grandpa, whatever, and grandma, and say, "Hey, I need help with my money." Right? Well, manage. Hey, we'll go. You'll go with my guy or
Yeah.
my ladies. Right? We'll go my
Mhm.
firm. Well, of course you take them on, but the problem is if you're still using your more manual process where it's your hands are all over everything in the portfolio, labor intensive, right? It's not cost efficient. It's hard to make money on these small balance accounts, especially if they don't have the ability to pay you a flat fee or something yet that makes
Mhm.
sense for you. Well, some of these wealth tech solutions could do that for you, right? It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
listen, for your type of account, here's what we do. We use this solution and it makes life a lot easier. The other thing that's interesting to me, and we've had like, as an example, we had the founders of Vise on this show and others. There are solutions like that are allowing for much more complex asset management
Oh, yeah.
with every lever you can imagine, right? So is it important that the companies you invest in have diversity, equity, and inclusion in their management and in their board?
Mhm.
Check that box. Okay, great. We can make sure that only securities show up there.
Yeah.
Uh,
ESG.
yeah, ESG is we need to avoid certain concentration risks because you work for Google and your spouse works for Tesla, right? Like, okay,
Mhm.
guess what? Those companies don't go into your portfolio here because you
Yeah.
already have a whole bunch of stock, right? So these solutions are getting more and more complex in their ability to render asset management, whereas before you thought that might have been only a human thing. So it is worth exploring to expand your abilities.
Yeah, and think about if your clientele are high net worth executives, that whole stock conundrum is a
Ugh,
big deal.
yeah,
It's a big deal. So when you can solve for that for them, it's very helpful.
absolutely. So we're reaching the end here. I can see we could kick it for home, but I think many, if not most, of the advisors who are listening and watching us here are starting to go, okay, I definitely see the opportunity to add some level of outsourcing or to leverage some other types of technology solutions to free up time, to render better service, to maybe even become more profitable, right? because I can bring on new clients, or I can add new services and charge my existing clients more. I could bring in more revenue without even adding clients or headcount. But I can imagine it's a little overwhelming too, right? You're like, okay, this is exciting. Oh, heart
Yeah.
palpitation going there. Where do you think someone should start? Is it with what offers the biggest bang for the buck out of the gate? Is it what's most simple to add? Like, where are you seeing, or maybe you actually have data that says, here's where RIAs and independent financial advisors typically start, and that helps to open up other opportunities.
Yeah. So I advise advisors to think about, I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but where are you truly delivering value?
Mm,
What do you love? Because if you're
mm,
doing what you love, brings you joy, that's generally going to bring you more success. So if you are the person that wants to manage money, that's great. And if you're doing, if you're delivering competitive returns, that's great. Look for that outsourced
yeah,
CPA, CFA. Look for outsourced marketing. Look
yeah,
for outsourced relationship stuff because, I'm kind of stereotyping, but
yeah.
if we look at the people that build and construct portfolios and love that, they're kind of engineer types. They're
Sure, absolutely.
versus relationship types.
Yep.
So figure out what you do best and then a way to outsource those other functions or grow internally. And,
Yeah.
outsourcing isn't right for everybody. Some people, they're fine to have 100 clients and serve them well. And they don't have aspirations to grow to be the
Mm,
billion-dollar RIA. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle choice. But understand where you bring value, what makes you happy to get up every morning and do your job. And then I think the thing will be clear. And also, I think you mentioned it before. Like, do you want to be, if you decide I'm just going to grow organically, I'm going to hire a bunch of people.
yeah.
Do you want to be a manager full time? Because
Right.
more people you hire, your role is going to shift. So even if you are involved in the CIO process, if you got 7 other investment folks, I mean, it's just by nature. You
Yeah.
move into a management role, and some people really don't like that,
Yeah. No,
and others thrive.
I love that because I've heard this phrase twice now. Aaron Klein used it, and then a prior guest on the show, and for some reason I'm having a complete brain freeze up on what his name is. But this term, and I'll link his show up in the show notes. But this term, accidental business owner. Now, so either
Mhm.
lots of people are using it and it's in the press, and I'm missing it, and it's just these guys both happen to use it, but many advisors have become accidental business owners, right? They got into the business when they were stockbrokers, or they became an advisor, but they really were in a sole practitioner role, if you will. But as things grew, and especially if they broke away from a wirehouse, next thing you know, they've got maybe an assistant working there. Maybe they have a junior advisor and what have you, a CIO on board. Next thing you know, like, hey, this is a real business, and I've never set
Yeah.
out to be a business owner, right? So now I have to start thinking about efficiencies and things like that. But for some people, maybe they do want to roll solo. Maybe it's just nice. I don't
Yeah.
report to anybody. I have nobody else to have responsibility for. And even there, you could free up your time and continue. I love that you say, do what you love. Find out the things that bring you the most joy, that also bring in the most value, the way you interact with your clients, and find a way to have somebody else do the other stuff.
Absolutely. I'm always
Wonderful.
looking to do that, Mike.
I don't mow my own lawn. And it's so funny. It's like, it was great. I just popped in my head, like the lawn guys came today.
Yeah.
And I don't mind. I actually do like mowing the lawn because I used to do it I've been mowing the lawn since I was a little kid. You're like 12 years old or something, but it's time consuming, right?
Right.
And it doesn't bring a lot of value other than like, looks nice, like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sort of thing. And I'm like, hey, if it could just happen, because I also like when things like that, like you always in your mind, you're thinking this thing needs to get done.
Mhm.
And then if it rains, you're like, I was going to do it this day. Now I have to keep it on the to-do list, the mental to-do list. And so if I could free that up, whether it's at home or in the business, I love it.
Yeah, it gives you more time and reduces your stress
That's
over
right. That's
things
right.
that shouldn't stress you out.
It's 100%. Well, listen, Laura, Greg, it is always so wonderful to have you on the show. I'm so glad you guys reached out and said, oh, we've got some new stuff to talk about. And so please, anytime you have new stuff to talk about, make sure you come on by. What is the best way for people to follow up? And we'll get that all linked up in the show. But what are the best ways for people to follow up and learn more about the study and some of the interesting things you're doing there at FlexShares ETFs?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our website is flexshares.com, but to get to the 12 years of research on outsourcing, you can go to go.flexshares.com/outsourcing. And if you're interested in that other behavioral study I mentioned, it's go.flexshares.com/wallet share. So I think both of those are great insights that might help you just reconsider something.
Absolutely love it. And if people are like me who really like you and really like to hear more from you, what's the best way for people to stay in touch with you and hear more about what you're working on?
Mike, I forgot to mention the Flexible Advisor podcast.
See what I got going on here?
Me.
I think of you, baby. I got you.
You can download it wherever you get your podcasts, the Flexible Advisor podcast. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Laura Hanachek Greg is how you can find me there.
Perfect. See, I throw up lobs all the time. Laura,
I appreciate
it. Spiked it home, baby. I love that. That was great.
I'm a very shameless promoter of that podcast. I can't even believe I didn't bring it up.
100% promote the heck out of that thing, right? You want people to follow you. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you very much, Laura, for coming on.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much for listening to and/or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always great to have you with us. Huge thanks to Laura Gregg as well for coming back on the show to share some of the insights and wisdom she and her team at FlexShares ETFs surfaced in this year's Scalability survey. I also really appreciate the extra color that Laura added to the topic as well. This is one of those episodes which really reminds you that this is a people business, and we need to remember that because it's really easy to get lost in the numbers. And I thought Laura did a fantastic job bringing that type of stuff to the forefront. And it's not just about, oh, this percentage and this number of whatever from the survey, right? It's really bringing the human element into it. So thank you, Laura. Awesome, awesome stuff. Okay. That's it for today. As I mentioned at the top of the show, please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And if you haven't done so already, give this episode a like on your favorite social platform and share it with your network as well. Chances are, if you like this episode of the show, your network will as well. Okay? Until next time, please make sure you're being safe and be nice to each other. We'll see you next week on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.